Yo, it's everything I watched in August. I started this month with Space Chimps as well as a bunch of other animated films. I have a separate video on those, so go check that out. Also tried to watch a movie a month and I ended up watching Doctor Strange the Multiverse of Madness. I also have a video on that as well. On the 4th of August, I watched a short film because I had no time to really watch anything. So does that still count? Surely it has to. I'm not going to try pronouncing the name of what I watched. Aside it being a Zulu animated film about a kid getting bullied and his nan gives him like this sort of confidence or something, I cannot remember a thing I watched here. And to start with the actual stuff, I watched Brightburn this month and I hated it because this is supposed to be an off-brand evil Superman type of movie, but it got all those aspects wrong. I feel like the mother did so much to raise him in such a good way, so like his crash out and everything of him being evil just had no purpose. It was just lazy to all just pin everything on the alien, like activating his evilness basically, especially factoring that James Gunn was a producer in this. I'm surprised that he didn't speak out on that. I also followed that up with Fallen Angel this month and this just felt like a waste of time, and I don't get how I sat through this and just never connected for me. Its non-linear story confused me because I thought it was at two different stages of that same person's life for the most part, and I didn't even realize it was two different guys towards the end of the movie. I really did not care too much about the film, and I enjoyed that one dude just going about people's businesses and having fun. But after that phase wore off, I didn't really care too much about the movie, and the whole part of his dad and how halfway in the film I'm supposed to re-register my brain to connect with that. Come on, what I trying to do? Then I watched Gran Torino. I was expecting this to be the same quality of Million Dollar Baby, but simply did not get that on here. It's pretty surprising how the great Clint Eastwood's performance here is so bland and dead, and it also translates to most of the characters in this film. It's also predictable that 20 minutes in, you already know how the film is going to end. And the only ounce of the movie that I really enjoyed was Scott Eastwood's cameo. I also watched Ronin this month, and I do not really remember it. It's just your normal action movie. I'm sure something happens towards the end, like a twist, but I was far too uninterested to the point that I didn't really care too much. But I remember I loved the start of the film, like when they're doing this, planning this heist and they're scooping the place out, and you see De Niro being this intellectual merc, and everything was just entertaining there. But when the film just started to spin out of control, it was still enjoyable. I just think that the final hour it messed itself up and the film just could not resolve itself. Also watched the Alien Trilogy. Wanted to do a video on this, but really did not have much to say about each of the films individually. They're really good films, classics. Going back to the first, it felt like I overpraised this film for its visuals. It still holds up, but not just as groundbreaking as I remember this from a couple years back. The ship stuff is really good, but some certain aspects just didn't have that Hollywood magic on me anymore. But really, Ridley Scott was just on his bag for this movie. Aliens was a huge leap in almost every department for me, aside the Power Ranger-esque fight sequence towards the end, which I know for its time it looked pretty good, but everything else was remarkable. To look at the character moments with Newt, Hicks, Ripley, everything was great, just elevated our story. Also Bishop, played by Lance Henriksen, was just phenomenal. It's such a good movie, and if you haven't watched Aliens, what are you doing? Alien Roots Power 3 though? Not great. I always say this, David Fincher has never made a bad movie thingy. And the problem I have with Alien 3 is just like the first hour was just boring. Compared to the first two films, the opening premise is just stupid. It makes a good back half, how he sets it up and everything. But just seeing how these prisoners interact and dealing with the situation. Also, what were they thinking to kill the heart of the first film? Like, don't get me started. And towards the end is when you start to notice more of that Fincher flair and when the action happens and it's engaging with you, with me more. But it just felt too little too late. Also watched two cinema releases this month, Borderlands and Alien Romulus. Have videos on both of them, so go check that out. I liked Alien Romulus. There's nothing you can tell me otherwise. Film took the good aspects and the good parts of the first two films at least, and it could have been worse, so I'm happy it was a good movie. I also watched Blink twice in theaters, and I think overall this film was pretty good and a really strong statement piece from Zoe Kravitz, but I just felt it took too long to unravel itself. Yes, it had to lay breadcrumbs at the start, but it's already a short film. I believe they just added a bunch of stuff to bloat its runtime, and even Zoe and her team, they took like a lot of artistic choices with the way the camera worked and how each individual frame looked, and that helped them make what could have been 2 seconds into 6 seconds. And all that stylized filmmaking is then somewhat broken towards the climax to fit in with that pace in there. But it's Zoe Kravitz. I couldn't hate anything she's involved in apart from that weird Jaden Smith business. And speaking of Jaden, I watched Hitch with his father Will Smith, and I miss these type of movies. Comedies with big actors attached to them. We still get them sometimes, like No Hard Feelings from last year, but I can't even mention any that came out this year so far. The ending did feel like it was speed running itself, but what led up to it was pretty enjoyable and fun. And in rom-com fashion, their lives were just so unrealistic. Like, I get what your job is, but you're not getting that much money from what you're doing. Still on the genre of rom-coms, I watched Harry Met Sally. I actually ranked this lower than Hitch on my letterboxd, but hear me out. In my own opinion, firstly, Hitch was more funnier, and it just made that entire film just be like a breeze to get past. Whereas this was way better in that romantic aspects. The chemistry from the two leads was really good, and it really did help to make the friends to lovers theme like believable. But then something happens towards the end, and why? It destroyed the entire structure. Why create this stupid artificial conflict? It just felt like a really dumb barricade. And the funny thing is that there were two instances of this. Like the first one I could maybe overlook, but doing it twice, what?
How have you? Oh man, you're just ruining it.
Also, I watched Public Enemies because I felt like watching something that would take me back to like the Donnie Brasco that I watched last month. And if you put a gun to my head to tell you what the plot of this film was, I'll probably be dead. Not to sound like a moron, because obviously the life of John Dillinger, played by Johnny Depp, this bank robber, that's supposedly changed the FBI. But I feel what hindered this film for me was the fact that it was a true life story and they tried to stay as true as to the story as they could. I could be wrong, but for this big time criminal, his story was just kind of boring, if I'm being honest. And maybe this is my Christian Bale bias talking here, but I would have just preferred if the film was centered around him and the FBI rather than do this whole John Dillinger thing. But speaking of Christian Bale, I watched American Psycho and it was genuinely such a really fun time. Christian Bale is still cementing himself as one of my all-time favorite actors, and what a performance of this mentally broken man. At times he reminded me of Homelander, this narcissistic persona Patrick Bateman had, wants to be better than everyone and be that center of attention, and just loses himself to be what he isn't. This was a rewatch, but I don't know, it just felt less serious than I originally remembered it to be. Me not taking it serious somewhat made me even love it even more. Like just the final act when he tries to kill that cat and just goes on that whole killing spree. Probably one of the funniest moments I've ever seen. Then from American Psycho, I watched American Beauty this month, and this was indeed a really well made film. Its art direction to the performance from both Kevin Spacey and also Wes Bentley really doing it for me, but it's just not something I can ever see myself watching again. I love seeing how Kevin Spacey, just this guy, slowly starts to lose himself in the film, but he was the best part of the movie, and there were a lot of funny moments involving his character. But the thing with the movie was I just failed to, it just missed to have that lock in for me that gives you my full satisfaction. I don't know what it is, but I just found a hard time to love it. I also finally watched Despicable Me 4, and this was a great back to grace of the franchise for me. Not as good as the first two movies, but to quote the Weekly Planet, what they said about this film, it was trying to tackle too many story points at once, and in eliminations, you just do not have to do too much. I like the fact that compared to the third movie, they put the focus more on Gru. But why introduce a character like Poppy, for example, when you have the three daughters to choose from? Edith was right there to play that role of Poppy, and also because it focuses more on Gru, it takes away from the Lucy. And I did still find her side plot really interesting and really funny. It was this nice little adventure that she has, and that's still the thing with this movie. As much as it was still trying to tackle all these stories and everything, it still happened to make some of the stories entertaining. But my problem is just pick 3 and just set with it. You don't have to do all 5. Then a TikTok recommendation and I watched Wild Things and I loved it. Such an entertaining movie with great pacing and a billion twists, which led to its downfall because I put this on my letterboxd. But this film had like 5 twists and it decided to stick with the worst one. Because firstly, it needed so much exposition to let you know and understand that, oh, this is happening, and throwing that in 10 minutes at the end.
Come on now, dog.
And a bit of spoiler territory here, but the character that wins was not even a major player in this movie till like a large part into it. So it felt like I had no sentiment or anything when that character gets that final win. Then I watched Chronicle this month, and originally when I was writing the script for Chronicle, I was gonna say, why does Hollywood stop making movies like this? But they really haven't. They always make stuff like this. Look at Supercell that has recently released on Netflix. They just get dumped on streaming now. Really have nothing too much to say about this, but if you like hand cam footage films with teenagers having superpowers, you'd like this. And also, this did a better job at doing Brightburn than Brightburn trying to do Brightburn. I don't know if that made sense. It had a better evil superhero, basically. Then I watched Trainspotting finally, and it was as good as I could imagine. See, if you have some 90s, 2000s British movie recommendations like this, or Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, please, I want to know them so I can watch them. But yeah, back to the movie. Ewan McGregor carried this role. Just seeing this guy, this druggie, like his entire life spiraling out of control. Like the first 10 minutes of this film, what is happening? warning, like no warning. He tries to get out of that life, but they somehow break him back into it. But it's like in that sticky situation that these are his friends. They've been with him since day one, basically. So you can't really say no. And you can't really blame him for what he does at the end, because they deserved it, and W him for giving back to his friend at the end. But see, it's a great story. I just wish that they didn't drop the plot point of him having that romantic relationship with a minor. They should lock his ass up. But see, that part of the film that just disappeared, along with other story points that just disappeared from the start, that was just my little tiny problem with it. But I don't really care, because it was still a good film without them. Then I watched Watchmen Chapter 1, and I will drop a review when part 2 comes out. And so far, it reminds me a lot of the Zack Snyder one. No surprise there. But I haven't watched that film in like 3 years, and I watched the ultimate cut. That film was like, I think the ultimate cut is like almost 4 hours long, and it was a pretty hard watch when I watched it back then, so I can't really compare them. But like, no BS, a really enjoyable time with the animated one. I was watching this while also being on the phone with my friend, and I somehow just kept going along with the movie. And truly, I can't wait for the second part. I don't know, the entire premise of Watchmen, it's very surprising how I enjoyed this, because on paper I'm not supposed to like this, but I'll talk more about that when I'm doing the review for that. Then I watched The Guard, and I hated it. It's not funny, the story is boring. No apologies if you like this movie. I hated it. The only thing that saves it is Don Cheadle, and he's not in it much anyways. I also watched After Hours this month, and this was my favorite movie of the month, overtaking Robots. And this was way different from any other Scorsese film I've ever watched, and I was really taken by surprise because of that. Such a simple yet very well made film, because it's just telling a story about a regular guy that went from what he would have thought would have been a great night to one that he will never forget for quite the opposite reason. The pacing of the entire picture was phenomenal. Film got me guessing at the start whether or not, like, if this guy was even dreaming or not, how everything was just going down. And I guess maybe it's just because I don't live in New York, and this was probably just a regular day for if you live in New York, I guess. It's a really fun watch, and I highly recommend it. Was going to tag that I've never watched a Scorsese picture that I've never enjoyed, but I watched Mean Streets, and that changed that for me. Also want to preface that I was pretty exhausted when watching this, and I fell asleep for most of it, so that destroys my freaking review for this. But I was just not a fan. I have seen really cool stories of a premise like this, like the coming of age, not really coming of age, but like starting from the ground up to be part of the mafia, basically like a Mafia 2 story from the game, if you've ever played that. But I don't know, the film just didn't connect with me, so I fell asleep for most of the chunk of it. Also watched Species this month. I talked about that in my Venom video briefly, and this was just an alien clone, but tried to be different, and I loved it for that. Think another angle that made me love this film as much as I did is because I had low expectations for it, and it surpassed that. Just the cat and mouse chase with them and the creature, and how it grew smarter. Movie did have a human problem, like there were too many protagonists, too many human beings. Don't think the film really knew what to do with them. For example, they gave Forrest Whitaker superpowers, and he was even one of the better characters in this movie. Aside him and Michael Madsen, I think every other person in this film was expendable. But see, if you overlook that and don't really take this film seriously for what it is, because I thought it was going to be like one of these dumb bodily horror films that came out in the 90s, but it was better than that. Compare this film with Venom. I feel like Venom could have been this. If you want to see what I said there, go watch that video. I also watched Morbius and Madam Web, but I talked about Venom more because, well, it's a good movie. Also watched Gone Baby Gone this month, and this was gets another movie that I just had as background noise. I did watch the first 30 minutes like fully focused, but it just did not connect with me. The characters felt too much like actors acting. I have a bunch of other problems with it, but I feel like it's probably just a me thing. But I really can't see myself ever watching this film again. Maybe another reason why I didn't like the film is because I thought it was going to be like Gone Girl. It's not anything like Gone Girl. Then I watched Hoodwinked, and this was right up my alley. Was tempted to add this in my video of the animated films, but it just didn't reach that criteria because I didn't grow up with it. And I really wish I watched this when I was younger, because it's incredibly funny with its entire premise being like Shrek, that Shrek world where all these fairy tale characters are real and them having regular normal lives. Like freaking Red Riding Hood is baking cookies, for example. I don't know. It also reminds me of Zootropolis with the whole case and trying to solve it and the investigation and all of that, and the references and wackiness, and it's just this big mystery whodunit, and the ability to tell 3 different stories but make each one entertaining. I can't lie, some of the stories, their quality varied, but still, it's a kids movie, and they each had like this one clue pointing to the bad guy. It was just really fun. And the animation is terrible, but it really made up with everything else. We'll jump to the fact that I also watched Fury this month, a movie I wanted to watch since like 2016. And after a long wait, it did not disappoint. I will just start off by saying my only gripe is that it's a $70 million film, and it does feel like a $70 million film, especially in the war scenes, because it just doesn't feel as big as immersive as something like a 1917 or a Saving Private Ryan or something. But see, it was entertainment still, and the final fight was great, I can't lie. Logan Lerman, I couldn't stand his character, but I want to assume that he was written that way. David Ayer as writer and director, this might also be the best movie I have watched that he's been involved in. And yes, that means that I prefer this movie to Training Day. Shia LaBeouf was also in this, but I felt like his character was just ghosted because I was expecting a big performance from him because of what John Berto said. Also love John Berto, as well as Michael Pena and of course Brad Pitt. Also watched Meet Joe Black starring Brad Pitt again, and this was strange in concept. It had good moments, but its execution, my opinion, just missed the mark. I was not sure whether to take this film seriously or not. Then he threw that bit at the end and I was just left more confused. If you have watched this, I want to know how you saw it, because I can't fully describe how I feel and I might need to piggyback and reflect my opinion on someone else's thoughts. Then I watched The Secretary. I really don't know how I got to this side of cinema, but I managed to watch this very strange film of a woman that was having problems of cutting herself or something like that. She's a masochist in this film, but then she has this boss that tickles her itch just the right way and everybody doesn't match up to it, and it then becomes this wild power dynamic. My guy doesn't even want to deal with it at some point anymore, but they end up still being together. This is a very terrible explanation of what this movie is. And back to some sort of normality, I watched a couple time travel films, starting with Butterfly Effect, and I'm mad I watched all the endings of this film after, because I got the really disturbing one, the one that if you watch this movie you know what I'm talking about. If you've seen that ending, you know what I'm talking about. And I just thought realistically, if I was to be evil and not only care about myself, I would just give myself the happy ending, me with the girl. And if I did care about my friends, I'd just lose my hands. But then the thing with his mom happened, so I understand. But I don't get how he just didn't try to save that woman. His friend gets the upper hand and he just freezes. Like, I'm so confused as to what he was thinking in that moment. There was also a lot of gray areas in this, but I'll just overlook all of that. It takes a little while to get strapped in, but the final hour of this film pays off, trust me. Then I watched Looper, and the solution here was even way more straightforward. Just kill the kid.
Fuck them kids. Fuck the kids?
I'm really on Bruce Willis' side here. He is too dangerous. Screw that kid. But the fool just shot his mother. And still, even after you shoot the mother, you don't chase after him. I think the solution there was pretty straightforward. But aside that, if this film had no fat in it, in terms of concept, it's really smart and fun. But the whole thing at the middle just feels like nothing happens. Bruce Willis doesn't really do anything for majority of it, and time is just passing. Also, that really affected my investment before everything else now fell into place. And then I watched Boy Kills World. I'm really happy I finally watched this. I love John Benjamin. I think a lot of people hated the voiceovers, maybe because they hear that voice and they immediately think Bob's Burger. And as a massive fan of the Archer series, he just brought that Archer character to this maniac killer, and I loved it. And also him having like this his dead sister with him too was just so fun. And my one issue, I always have one issue with all these movies, but my one issue with this was like, do something and stick with it. There's a twist in this and I'm like, is that twist needed? Couldn't they just have made this a normal revenge story? Because when that twist happens and everything that follows, you just ask yourself why. Shout out Homeboy for being in this film too. I also watched Vanilla Sky this month and it's good. Could we just have more movies like this? Filmmakers, you don't have to make the most entertaining thing ever. Just a good story with good acting that just takes me away for 2 hours. And that is what this film did. Nothing crazy. Penelope Cruz is gorgeous too. And I don't blame you, Tom. I'd crash out too if I couldn't have her again. Twist wasn't even anything mind-crackling. And it's fine as that. You don't have to flip the entire movie on its head to just wow me, to wow the audience. I also watched Aftersun, and this was also a movie I watched when I was not in like the right state of mind, so I didn't like it as much as other people might have done. I also thought when going into this, I just had that mentality that this film was going to be like How to Have Sex from also last year. But I don't know, I think it's a bit more different. I feel like the movie also is more of like a visual film because I was paying more attention with my ears with this movie rather than paying attention with my eyes. Seeing what is going on will make you connect with what's happening in the movie more than just listening to dialogue. But there's one part in the movie that just took me out because there's this guy, he says a certain amount of money in Turkish lira, I think that's the Turkish currency, and it now amounted to a really small amount in pounds, and it just took me out of the film. But besides that, I can't really talk too much about it because I didn't really pay attention. And finally, I ended this month with Erin Brockovich. And Julia Roberts, I was never familiar with your game. She won an Oscar for this, and deservedly so. She served, and she served hard. She carried this film on her back with her quick line deliveries, her aura she brought to this character and the scenes, and just being this modern day hero, this strong female lead. That's what they call them. See, I'm not even going to bother trying to glaze her anymore in this role because she was just phenomenal in this and elevated what was already a well-crafted film by Steven Soderbergh. Now finally for TV, I watched Batman the Caped Crusader, and I remember absolutely nothing from this, and in my defense, I watched this early in the month. I was not mad at any of the changes the TV show made, and I did enjoy the fact that this was more of like a Batman Tales of Gotham type of show, as he made more focus towards Barbara Gordon and the GCPD than it did on Batman. And even with that imbalance in screen on time, it just did not even hinder the entertainment value for me. And I hear there's a season 2 coming out, or it's in the works, and I'm already interested. I will eat whatever you serve. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.